Welcome to the Audio Mixing Bootcamp. Whether you're an aspiring music producer or an audio engineer looking to sharpen your skills, this class is designed to take your mixing abilities to the next level. Audio mixing is one of the most critical aspects of music production. It's where you take all the individual elements of a track and blend them together to create a polished and professional sound. In this bootcamp, we'll cover the fundamentals of audio mixing, including EQ, compression, reverb, delay, and stereo imaging. We'll also go over techniques like balancing levels, panning, and automation to give your mix that polished, radio-ready sound. By the end of this session, you'll have the knowledge and tools to mix your own tracks with confidence. Section 1. What is audio mixing? Before we dive into the technical aspects, let's define what audio mixing is. In simple terms, mixing is the process of adjusting and combining individual tracks in a recording to create a cohesive final product. Whether you're working on vocals, drums, guitars, or synthesizers, your goal is to balance all of these elements so they complement each other and sound great together. The main objectives of mixing include balancing levels, ensuring each instrument or vocal sits in the mix at the right volume, equalization, shaping the tonal balance of the individual elements so they don't clash, compression, controlling dynamics to ensure a smooth, consistent sound, panning and stereo imaging, positioning instruments within the stereo field to create space and depth, effects, reverb, delay, etc., adding space and character to your tracks to give them a sense of dimension. Section 2. Setting up your mix. Before you start tweaking EQ and adding effects, it's important to properly set up your mix. Here are a few key steps to get started. Gain staging. Gain staging is crucial to prevent distortion and clipping in your mix. Ensure that all of your tracks are at a healthy level without exceeding 0 dB. Organize your tracks. Label your tracks clearly and group similar elements together. For example, group all your drum tracks, synths, and vocals. This will help keep your session organized and make it easier to manage. Reference track. Choose a professionally mixed and mastered track that sounds similar to the sound you're aiming for. Use it as a reference to compare your mix throughout the process. Initial balancing. Start with a rough balance by adjusting the volume faders. Make sure the key elements, like the vocals or lead instrument, stand out, while other elements support the mix. Section 3. Equalization. Equalization, or EQ, is one of the most powerful tools in mixing. It allows you to shape the frequency balance of your tracks to make sure each element has its own space in the mix. Here are some key EQ techniques. High-pass filter. Low cut. Use a high-pass filter to remove unnecessary low frequencies from instruments that don't need them, like vocals, guitars, and cymbals. This clears up space in the low end for bass and kick drums. Cutting problem frequencies. If a particular track sounds muddy or harsh, use EQ to cut those problem frequencies. For example, reducing frequencies around 200-500 Hz can help clear up muddiness in vocals or guitars. Boosting presence and clarity. For vocals, boosting around 3.5 kHz can add clarity, while boosting the high-end 10 kHz and up can add air and brightness to the overall mix. Tonal shaping. Use EQ to shape the overall tone of each track. For example, if your snare drum lacks punch, try boosting the mid-range. If your bass guitar sounds too dull, a boost in the low mids can add warmth. The key to EQ is subtlety. Small adjustments can make a big difference. Avoid drastic boosts or cuts unless absolutely necessary. Section 4. Compression basics. Next, let's talk about compression. Compression is used to control the dynamic range of a track, making the quieter parts louder and the louder parts quieter. This helps create a more consistent sound across the mix. Here's how to set up a basic compressor. Threshold. The threshold determines when the compressor kicks in. Set it so that the compressor only affects the loudest parts of the signal. Ratio. The ratio determines how much compression is applied. For example, a 4:1 ratio means that for every 4 dB over the threshold, the compressor reduces it by 3 dB. Attack and release. The attack controls how quickly the compressor starts compressing after the signal passes the threshold. A slower attack allows more of the initial transient through, which is great for preserving punch in drums. The release controls how quickly the compressor stops after the signal drops below the threshold. Makeup gain. After compressing, the overall level of the track will likely drop, so use makeup gain to bring it back up to an appropriate level. Compression can help tighten up a mix, but too much can make it sound squashed and lifeless. Always aim for balance and natural dynamics. Section 5. Reverb and delay. For space, reverb and delay are effects that add depth and space to your mix. They can make a dry recording sound more natural and lively, or they can be used creatively to add character. Reverb simulates the sound of a space, such as a room, hall, or chamber. Adding reverb to vocals or instruments can give them a sense of depth and make them feel like they're in a real environment. However, too much reverb can make your mix sound muddy, so use it sparingly. Delay creates an echo effect by repeating the sound after a short time. It's commonly used on vocals, guitars, and synths to add rhythmic or spatial interest. When used subtly, delay can create a sense of width without overwhelming the mix. Use reverb and delay to create a sense of space without making your mix too washed out. Sometimes, a combination of both effects on different elements can make the mix more immersive. Section 6. Panning and stereo imaging. Panning and stereo imaging allow you to position elements in the left, right, or center of the stereo field. This creates space in your mix and helps you achieve a sense of width. Panning instruments start by keeping key elements like vocals, bass, and kick drums in the center. Then, pan supporting instruments like guitars, synths, or backing vocals to the left or right to create separation. Stereo widening. Some elements, like synth pads or background vocals, can benefit from stereo widening. This technique spreads the sound across the stereo field, giving the mix more depth and width. Avoid overpanning. While panning can create space, overpanning can make your mix feel unbalanced. Always check your mix in mono to ensure it still sounds cohesive when collapsed. Section 7. Automation. For dynamics and movement, automation allows you to create changes in volume, panning, or effects over time, adding movement and dynamics to your mix. For example, volume automation. If a vocal part gets buried during a loud chorus, you can automate the volume to increase slightly when necessary. Effect automation. You can automate reverb or delay to kick in during certain parts of a song, like during a chorus or breakdown. Panning automation. Use panning automation to create movement in your mix, like panning a guitar riff from left to right during a solo. Automation is a powerful tool to keep your mix interesting and dynamic throughout the track. Section 8. Final steps. Mixing down and referencing. Once you've completed your mix, it's time to prepare it for mastering. Here are some final steps. Reference your mix. Compare your mix to your reference track one last time. Make sure the overall balance, tonal quality, and volume levels are consistent. Check in mono. Listen to your mix in mono to ensure that it still sounds clear and balanced. Some stereo effects can cause phase issues in mono, so it's important to check. Mix down. Bounce. Once you're satisfied with your mix, bounce it down to a stereo file. Make sure to leave some headroom around 6 dB for the mastering process. Outro. Congratulations! You've made it through the audio mixing bootcamp. We've covered everything from EQing, compression to panning, reverb, and automation. By applying these techniques, you'll be well on your way to crafting professional sounding mixes. Remember, practice is key to becoming a great mixer. The more you experiment with these techniques, the better your mixes will become. Thanks for joining me.